Welcome back to The Hope Show. For this episode, we're going to do a little ethical short on cultural humility. Okay, so we hear this word being thrown around all over the internet and LinkedIn, all these different platforms. And what is it? What does it mean? One of the things that in the field of ABA has changed as of January 1st of 2022, the BACB added culture humility to the Code of Ethics.
The new Code of Ethics.
The new Code of Ethics. So that's very, very exciting. But one of the things that we kind of want to talk about, what is a culture humility, but mainly application of it. Mm-hmm. Because I think that when we see a lot of things with the ethical codes and different things in ABA, we find that BCBAs coming out of their graduate programs and things like that with regards to ethics is, okay, I know this is the list. This is how you kind of determine what's least harm and things like that. Mm-hmm. But then it kind of stops with a little bit, of that application of the long term. But also, how do you create a culture of consultation, of support, of ongoing, really just kind of working through ethical dilemmas, and one of those things that I see a lot of times, especially when BAs come to the Hope Source from other places, it's like, consultation and collaborating like that means if I ask questions, then I don't know, or I'm incompetent, mm-hmm. Or things like that. And that is not an appropriate, really ethical way to be. So we need to create in our practices, in our clinics, a way in which we can set up the culture there for collaboration, for consultation, for open dialogue of, okay, here's this thing, help me understand what are the ethical implications, how is this a dilemma for me, all of those types of things. And I think that when you have that kind of opens the door for really understanding what this kind of new term, cultural humility, means for the field. So when I was in school, nearly 20 years ago in social work, we really, had a lot of training, extensive coursework in cultural competency. It was ingrained in all the ethical discussions on ethical dilemmas and how we kind of really infuse that into all of our work. And we use that word cultural competency. And now we have this new term. I'm in the ABA field now as a social worker, and we're using this term cultural humility. What can you tell us the differences maybe between the two, or maybe a little bit of history of why these terms may or not may be synonymous, or they're, I don't know.
So as a psychologist, I use the same term, cultural competency.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I know of. And it sounds more recently that it's not as good as a cultural humility.
Oh, okay.
And it's, when I looked at it, and it's, depends on the person, but it's the same thing. In this field, psychology, therapy, mental health field, mm-hmm. we have talked about basically cultural humility, but using the word
competency. Okay.
So it's pretty much the same thing. However, there is some argument that's saying that, hey, you can never be culturally competent. I think going by the word and saying that, hey, you never be the perfect with knowing all the cultural backgrounds. And that's not what it's supposed to be meaning.
Okay, so it's a little bit more like competent means I've reached the end, I've mastered this, but you can't ever, you're always going to have adjustments and different.
And culture is fluid.
Yes.
It's constantly changing. So what's one before and now it's changing too. So you can never capture all that.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Okay. So cultural humility, can you kind of go into what the essence of it right now, mm-hmm. and what we're talking about it in 2022?
So what we are looking at is not trying to understand all the cultures, but you kind of actually knowing about yourself. It's kind of opposite. So know about your biases and what common sense is, but that may not be common sense for other people.
Okay.
So then you learn about your background, what kind of experience you have, and how that affect your work with your clients.
Okay. So thinking about that, Nicole, like just as we have in light of cultural humility in family guidance, even, and thinking about you have, a vulnerable client, families of the client.
Yes, that's very key what you're saying, and I agree. I feel like I've learned a lot of that when working with families and family guidance, is that I do have some limitations within my own experience. And so the most important takeaway from those sessions have been to leave a space to learn. So to learn for each individual family, and that expands beyond if they have the same spiritual beliefs, the same cultural background. It's more about learning from that family.
Where they are coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think we even, yes, I think culturally we think about just culture. We think about the big things, okay, that everyone kind of talks about. But when you're in that kind of space and that kind of intimacy, you're looking at the family culture. You could look at as well, and thinking about, okay, how is this implication? Where are they coming from? If I support them in this way, is that really jiving, or is this my own way of what I think the family should be, because I would do it this way? When we kind of think about it, I guess go into biases on even parenting, on even how a family should operate. That kind of makes cultural humility get a little bit more, not necessarily broader, but to me a little actually more client specific and individualized in that kind of way.
Yeah, I think in our training that kind of helps, because we learned that every parent has different parenting style, even can have different parenting styles within the family unit, which is very interesting. And having to say, okay, maybe mom needs this type of coaching and guidance in this way, maybe dad needs this way, maybe grandma needs this way, and then we can even bring in siblings, and depending on age, maybe that looks totally different, right? From their understanding of what family guidance means, what does it mean to have a sibling who's on the spectrum.
So when we have to, as we're learning, okay, in the field of ABA, so this is, in this discussion, this is a new concept as of January 1st. This is a new concept, but in fields that have been around a while, seasoned, if you will, this concept, as you were talking about, has been around. So is it important for, I mean, of course it is, but when we think about interdisciplinary collaboration, I would recommend to behavior analysts, as this is new, and figuring out how to apply, how to sort this out, and, to collaborate and with other professions that have, kind of had a better understanding. But can you just leave it there?
Yeah, or not only that, I think you can collaborate or work with anybody who are around. So could it be between BCBAs that we can kind of talk about and kind of share backgrounds and your beliefs and stuff like it, which could be an uncomfortable topic, but actually I'm a little bit excited. This is kind of our training.
Yes.
And we go through a lot about self-reflections and understanding self. And that may be somewhat new and make you vulnerable, but that kind of make a cohesive team also. It's a kind of bonding experience too, while you also set up the culture where that you can get feedback from your colleagues, because you cannot see your biases that easily, and maybe you can kind of bring the light to that.
So setting up that, just going back to the culture of the workplace, to be open. So not just for this topic of cultural humility, if you set the tone overall for all ethical dilemmas, all ethical considerations,
correct,
that makes this topic that's a little bit more personal, a little bit more vulnerable on that level, to have a place to land that you can kind of trust, because you've already set the tone that I can go to Nicole and say, I think I screwed up, or I'm not sure what to do here or what this best practice is. And when we set that tone, then you're opening that door to be like, okay, so Nicole, help me out here. You know, and what am I thinking about? What am I missing? You know, how do I better understand this? And just that openness overall, is best practice. It does create a culture for ethics. And so, you know, as we challenge the exciting changes that are coming in the field of ABA, but as we wait for those graduate programs to start adding in, those applications in the coursework to help to really understand, because so much of our practice with our clients, not just in family guidance, but every behavior plan that we write, every treatment goal that we have to be thinking from that lens of what impact does it have on the culture of the client, whether that be in the broad sense, whether that be in, or in that small family unit sense. And to have evidence-based practice, you have to have the commitment from the family in order for it to be evidence-based practice. Right. So if we don't know, how can they commit if it goes against everything that they believe, or if we're not practicing those, culture of humility, then we can create a wall in that therapeutic relationship, and not be able to develop that rapport in a way that's going to be meaningful, that's going to have lasting outcomes for the client and their family. So we challenge people that are in the field of ABA to seek more information as there's our workshops and things coming about, but also make sure that your environment is to advocate for an environment at which you can talk about ethical dilemmas, because that's going to set the tone for being able to talk about things like cultural humility, cultural competency, and things like that, whatever you want to call it. So thanks for listening.